My son thought I didn't notice him slipping something unusual into my backpack, grinning as if he were innocent. But as soon as he turned his back, I quietly placed it inside his drawer. Half an hour later, the police showed up. You won't believe what happened after that. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. Terry's fist struck the oak table, rattling the dishes. The salt shaker toppled over, spilling white grains that glittered like shards of glass. My fork stopped in midair, a chunk of meatloaf skewered on its prongs. Dad, we need another $2,000 this month. The words landed heavier than his fist. I set my fork down slowly, the soft clink against the plate echoing in the silence. Zella sat across from me, twisting her wedding band under the harsh kitchen light. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes. She'd been crying before dinner. Enough. The word came sharper than I intended. You're 28, Terry. It's time you learned to support your wife yourself. He loomed over me, flushed with anger, or was it desperation? With him, it was hard to tell the difference. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room, a low drone between our ragged breaths. You're being selfish, Terry said, his voice cracking. Mom would have understood. She would have helped us. The mention of Martha struck like a punch. My jaw tightened, fist clenching without permission. Zella's sobs grew softer, muffled by the napkin she held to her face. The buttered green beans on my plate had gone cold. I shoved my chair back. The screech of wood against linoleum made Zella flinch. The overhead light carved sharp shadows on all our faces, turning supper into something more like an interrogation. I've already given you $1,200 this month, I said as I stood. Zella's protest was weak. He's trying, Dad. We're not as young as we used to be. Before that, it was the wedding venue. Then the apartment deposit you never used. Then the medical bills. Enough. Dad, please. No. My voice was final. I stepped away from the table, leaving behind the thick smell of cooling meatloaf and tension that could be sliced with a knife. I won't enable this anymore. Terry's breathing grew harsher, almost ragged. Zella's tears stopped, but her eyes stayed locked on her plate like it held the answers. The wall clock ticked towards 7:35 as I walked out of the kitchen. Each step felt heavier, as if weighted with failure. Behind me, Zella whispered to Terry, desperate, pleading, but I didn't catch the words. The stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed. Each step carried me further from another ruined dinner, another failed attempt at family. Their voices rose again behind me, his anger, her crying, the same broken song we'd been repeating for years. The hallway upstairs was dark, except for the warm glow spilling from my bedroom door. Inside, Martha's photograph waited on the nightstand, a reminder of when our family still made sense. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged beneath me, the springs groaning after 3 decades of use. Martha's side of the bed was still untouched, her pillows arranged the way she had left them 5 years ago. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the exhaustion of fighting the same battle again and again. I picked up her photo, Martha in her blue anniversary dress, smiling like the world was still whole. My thumb traced her cheek through the glass, warm under the lamp's glow. She would have understood, Terry had said. Maybe he was right. Martha always did see the best in him. But she also believed in discipline, in teaching, not indulging. 2 years ago, I sold my vintage Harley to cover the wedding deposit. That bike had been my pride, the 1970 Sportster I rebuilt after Martha passed. I told myself I did it for love, for family. Terry barely thanked me before asking about the honeymoon. 18 months later, it was an apartment deposit. I gave up my long-planned fishing trip to Alaska, $3,000 gone to a landlord for a place they never even moved into. 6 months ago, it was Zella's medical bills. I worked extra shifts at 57, hauling lumber with a back that had already given too much. The test found nothing worse than migraines brought on by stress. I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside lay the stack of papers, loans, credit lines, emergency withdrawals. My signature inked on every one, each time, a moment of weakness disguised as fatherly love. $47,000. That's what my son's emergencies had drained from me since Martha's funeral. Money that should have secured my retirement instead vanished into his recklessness. On the dresser sat Martha's perfume bottle, still uncapped, nearly empty. Sometimes I opened it just to remember. That night, the fragrance felt more like an accusation than a comfort. In the mirror above the dresser, I saw only an old man staring back, eyes dulled by fatigue, hair gone gray, shoulders bent beneath burdens that were never mine to carry. When had I become this person? When had love twisted itself into constant rescue? Martha's last words drifted through the stillness. Teach him to stand on his own, Ray. Don't let him remain in our shadow forever. I shut the drawer firmly. The pile of loan papers disappeared behind the wood-like evidence of my failures as a father. Downstairs, their voices had dropped to hushed urgency. I could make out Terry's pleading now, no longer demanding. Zella's responses came sharp and clipped, like instructions whispered through clenched teeth. I placed the photo back on the nightstand and clicked off the lamp. Darkness closed in around me, but I didn't lie down. Instead, I sat quietly, listening. The old house shifting on its frame, their muffled voices carrying upward, the steady rhythm of my own breathing finally evening out. Tomorrow had to be different. It simply had to be. The coffee maker sputtered its familiar song, steam rising from the carafe like incense at an altar. I'd been awake since 5:30, sleep impossible after the night's revelations. Morning light spilled into the kitchen, softening the edges of everything, as though the confrontation had been scrubbed away by dawn. I stood at the sink in my work clothes, a flannel shirt and jeans faintly scented with sawdust from my garage workshop. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked at nothing. Mrs. Peterson's newspaper still sat in her driveway, waiting for her slow shuffle in her robe. The creak of steps announced Terry. He appeared in the doorway at 7:05, t-shirt wrinkled, hair sticking up, dark shadows under his eyes. He avoided meeting mine. "Coffee's fresh," I said without turning. My voice sounded steady. "Good. Thanks." His reply was barely audible. The mug clinked against the pot as his hands trembled. Zella came in 2 minutes later, bathrobe pulled tight, makeup smeared under swollen eyes. She had been crying, or maybe she hadn't stopped. "Good morning," she offered softly, cautiously, like the right words might patch the cracks left from last night. I only nodded. Silence expanded between us, broken by the final hiss of the coffee maker and the faint rumble of a delivery truck outside. I washed the dinner dishes from yesterday, the scalding water biting at my hands, an ache I welcomed. It felt cleansing. Behind me, Terry poured coffee, spilling a little on the counter. Zella burned the toast, scraping it over the sink, black crumbs scattering like ash. "I'm going out today," Terry said suddenly, defensive before I even answered. "Interviews." I turned from the sink and looked at him. His eyes darted away to his cup. "Take the house key," I said quietly. The words lingered in the air. He might not return. Or maybe I wouldn't be here when he did. Color rose to his cheeks, but he didn't argue. Dust motes danced in the sunlight between us, time holding its breath. I could hear the steady drum of my heartbeat. He grabbed an apple instead of breakfast, pacing the kitchen with restless energy. "Terry," I said, halting him. He stopped, a flicker of hope lighting his expression. "Responsibility," I told him. "It isn't a curse." The hope drained from his eyes. His jaw clenched. Without another word, he left. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Zella stayed at the table, toast untouched. She looked at me, ready to speak, but I was already moving, coffee poured into my travel mug, boots carrying me toward the garage. The truck roared to life at once, steady and dependable, unlike everything else in my house. As I backed out, I saw Zella through the kitchen window, alone in the mess of breakfast, alone with secrets she and Terry guarded. The morning stretched ahead, equal parts promise and dread. Terry's excited voice reached me before I even stepped through the door. He leapt from the sofa, his face shining with a manic brightness. Dad, I'm sorry about yesterday. Tech Forge Solutions hired me. The words hit like a sudden blow. I set my lunch cooler down carefully, my rough hands trembling. Terry rushed forward, arms wrapping me in a hug that was too tight, too long. Really? My own voice carried hope I hadn't expected. That's wonderful, son. From the armchair, Zella clapped like an audience, sharp and staged. Her makeup was flawless, far too polished for someone who'd cried herself hollow yesterday. Her smile stretched wide, but it didn't reach her eyes. He got the call this afternoon, she announced like a presenter. Senior IT consultant. Terry let go but stayed close, running his fingers through his hair in that old nervous habit of his. His shirt was pressed, freshly laundered. When had he done that? I knew you could do it, I said, a weight lifting from my shoulders for the first time in days. The afternoon sunlight painted dust motes gold between us, making the room feel softer, kinder. When do you start? Monday, Terry said quickly. Too quickly. His voice pitched a little higher than normal, as though he'd practiced the line. That old mix of pride and relief settled heavy in my chest. Maybe yesterday's hard words had finally pushed him toward responsibility. Maybe Martha had been right all along. Sometimes love meant standing firm, even when it hurt. But something gnawed at me. Terry kept tugging at his collar, smoothing fabric that didn't need fixing. His eyes flicked to Zella, searching her face for cues, for reassurance. What's the pay? I asked, leaning back into my recliner. The leather groaned under me, a familiar sound that usually felt like home. 65 to start, Terry answered without pause. Full benefits too, health, dental, retirement, matching contributions. All the right responses. Exactly what a legitimate job would offer. And yet my mind couldn't stop cataloging the cracks. The timing felt too neat, too convenient. Outside, a mower roared to life. Kids laughed in a nearby yard. Ordinary suburban noises, sounds that should have been comforting. But instead, they seemed to highlight how staged our little celebration was. This calls for a cookout, I said, brushing aside my doubts. Let's fire up the grill, celebrate properly. Terry's face brightened, the first flicker of what looked like genuine happiness. Perfect, Dad. Just like old times. Zella clapped again, softer this time, but still putting on a show. I'll make my potato salad, the one with mustard, the way you like it. I stood, my joints protesting after another long shift on the site. Give me 20 minutes to get the coals burning. Terry, come lend a hand once I've got it going. Actually, he said quickly, already halfway to the stairs, I need to grab something first. Some papers from the interview. Want to show you the offer letter. I nodded, turning toward the back door. The grill waited under its cover like a faithful old friend. Tonight felt like a fresh start. Maybe we could rebuild what yesterday had broken. Behind me, Terry's footsteps creaked up the stairs. Zella shuffled toward the kitchen. Normal sounds. Normal family life. What do you want on the grill? I called, already knowing Terry would say burgers while Zella asked for chicken. The charcoal caught flame, little tongues of fire licking the black lumps. I wiped my hands on the towel draped across the handle, savoring the familiar ritual. The evening air smelled of lighter fluid and promise. But 10 minutes passed. No sign of Terry. Through the kitchen window, I could see Zella fussing with dishes, moving deliberately as if trying to keep busy. I turned back toward the house. The window framed the living room, glowing warm beneath the overhead light. And there he was. Terry stood hunched at the front door, crouched over my navy work backpack. His movements were fast, secretive, nothing like the confident man who had just boasted about a new job. He scanned the room before pulling the zipper open. My grip tightened on the grilling fork. From his pocket, he drew something small, wrapped in dark tissue. Carefully, with practiced hands, he tucked it deep into the bag, nestling it between my gloves and tape measure. The logical part of me scrambled for harmless explanations. A gift? A surprise? But his furtive glances, the precision of it, said otherwise. He zipped the bag shut, brushed his palms against his jeans as though wiping away evidence, and slipped out of sight. The whole thing lasted maybe 30 seconds. But to me, it felt like watching a crime unfold in slow motion. Smoke curled up from the grill, acrid and heavy, choking me. My appetite evaporated. Whatever he had hidden in that bag, it mattered. It carried weight. But if I confronted him, he'd know I'd been watching. Spying on my own son. The back door squeaked open. "How are the coals looking, Dad?" Terry's voice was too cheerful, too polished. I swallowed hard, tasting ash and suspicion. "Almost ready," I managed, keeping my eyes on the flames. "Just a few more minutes." I heard his footsteps cross the deck, the boards groaning lightly under his weight. From the corner of my vision, I saw him lean against the railing, calm, relaxed, like any other evening. But all I could picture were those secretive movements with my backpack. "You know what, son?" I finally turned to face him. "I think I left my gloves in the garage. Could you grab them while I get this fire steady?" For a split second, Terry's smile faltered. Then it was back, smooth and easy. "Of course, Dad. No problem." I watched him through the kitchen window as he passed by my bag without so much as a glance. His performance was flawless, too flawless for someone who had just hidden something inside. Whatever he stashed in there, I had to know. But timing was everything. "Just grabbing seasoning from the kitchen," I called to Zella as Terry disappeared upstairs. A moment later, the water pipes shuddered alive, his faucet running. That was my chance. My pulse thundered as I crossed into the living room. The familiar space felt altered somehow, shadows deeper, every creak of the floorboards magnified as if the house itself were warning me. I eased the zipper open. The soft metallic rasp sounded far louder than it should. Inside, the usual tools of my trade, my scuffed leather gloves, yellow tape measure, the worn notebook of sketches. But wedged near the spine of that notebook was something foreign, something wrapped in dark tissue. My fingers trembled as I peeled it open. The crackle of paper was deafening. And then I saw it. A ring, massive, dazzling, the centerpiece diamond encircled by a halo of smaller stones. Platinum setting. It caught the lamplight, scattering rainbows across the walls. I froze, breath caught in my throat. This wasn't costume jewelry. The heft in my palm told me it was genuine. $15,000, maybe $20,000 at least. Far more than Terry had ever earned. My knees gave out, and I sank into the nearest chair. The ring seared against my skin, heavy with questions I didn't want answers to. Where had he gotten this? Why put it in my bag? The faucet still ran upstairs. Terry's humming drifted down, a tuneless murmur that sounded normal, ordinary. But nothing about this was ordinary. Yesterday's fight replayed in my mind. His begging for money. Zella's tears. Had they been setting this up all along? Covering something darker with desperation? My brain spun through possibilities, each worse than the last. If it was stolen, hiding it in my backpack dragged me into the crime. Or worse. Maybe he intended to pin it on me. The water cut off. Footsteps moved across the bathroom floor. He would be down in moments, expecting to find me outside, grilling like the proud father celebrating his son's success. Acting on instinct, I slipped the ring into my pocket and carefully rewrapped the tissue, tucking it back exactly where he'd placed it. My hands shook as I sealed the zipper. By the time Terry reached the stairs, I was already on my feet. The weight of the ring in my pocket felt like lead, evidence of betrayal I wasn't ready to face. "Dad? Everything okay in there?" His voice carried an edge of fake concern. "Just heading back out," I answered evenly, forcing my body to move while my mind reeled. The ring burned against my thigh as I walked, its presence heavier than stone. From the kitchen window, I heard him call out casually, "How do you want the steaks? Medium rare?" "Whatever you think is best," I replied, my tone steady despite the storm inside me. The ring felt like a hot coal in my pocket, dragging me down with its weight. I found the stairs with muscle memory, skipping the third step that had squeaked for 20 years. Each move deliberate, careful, an engineer's method for solving an impossible equation. Terry had crossed a line, into my space, into my trust. Something about all of this was off, and I refused to walk into it blind. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with smiling family portraits that now looked less like memories and more like evidence of a life I clearly hadn't understood. His bedroom door hung slightly ajar. Afternoon light filtered through the window that overlooked our backyard. Through the glass, I could see his silhouette moving at the grill, all the ease and charm of a perfect family man. I eased the door open, careful to listen for squeaks. The hinges stayed silent, years of upkeep paying off. Inside, the air was thick with the mingled scents of Zella's perfume and smoke from the barbecue. Her blouse was draped over a chair. His laptop sat closed on the desk. Papers scattered nearby, little signs of their shared conspiracy. Against the far wall stood the dresser, its drawers stacked like locked vaults of hidden truths. I went for the middle one, the sock drawer. The least suspicious place for something important. My hands, rough from decades of work, sifted through their private things, pushing aside cotton and fabric until I had made a hollow space. If Terry thought it was acceptable to slip things into my bag without asking, then I could return the favor. The tissue paper crunched softly as I buried the ring deep beneath their clothes, where it would certainly be found if someone ever came searching. "Dad, these steaks are coming out perfect!" Terry's voice carried from outside, bright with enthusiasm, or at least a convincing copy of it. I shut the drawer with care, leaving the room exactly as I'd found it. The only trace of me was the fading warmth from my touch and the knowledge that I'd just altered the game. Through the window, Terry was setting the patio table, his movements relaxed, confident. He had no idea that 30 feet above him, the threads of his plan were unraveling. My heartbeat pounded as I slipped back into the hall. Whatever he intended to do with that ring, whatever role he thought I'd play, I had just rewritten his script. Turnabout was fair play. If he wanted to toy with evidence, he'd soon learn his father hadn't spent decades as an engineer without mastering the art of dismantling things. The stairs carried me down step by careful step, avoiding the creaks I knew too well. In the kitchen, I grabbed the bottle of steak sauce, my excuse for being inside. From the window, Terry waved, smiling like the picture of wholesome family life. I stepped back onto the patio just as the sharp slam of car doors shattered the evening calm. The sound cracked through the air like gunfire. I froze, spatula still in my hand, trying to make sense of why several vehicles had pulled up during our family dinner. Terry's face changed instantly. His easy smile dropped, replaced by an expression that looked far too much like excitement. He moved toward the house with sudden urgency, no longer the casual son manning the grill. "Who's here?" I asked, baffled. "Were you expecting anyone?" "No idea," Terry replied smoothly, though the false surprise in his tone was almost theatrical. "Maybe neighbors worried about the smoke." Voices approached, firm, commanding. My stomach tightened. Not neighbors. 3 officers stepped through the side gate, led by a woman in her 40s with a hardened expression. Her hand hovered near her radio, eyes scanning everything with sharp calculation. "Police! Nobody move!" I staggered back a step, the spatula clattering onto the stones. Zella emerged from the kitchen carrying a salad bowl, but froze when she saw them. The bowl slipped, shattering against the brick, lettuce strewn like confetti at a funeral. Terry didn't hesitate. He lifted a finger and pointed straight at me. "Steady. Certain. Officer, that's him. I saw the ring in his backpack." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. "What?" I stammered, disbelief cracking my voice. "What ring?" But Terry was already at the officer's side, eager to cooperate. Too eager. His posture radiated calm confidence, not the fear or shock any son should show while watching his father accused. The lead officer introduced herself as Brooks, her gaze dissecting every detail of the scene. We received a report about stolen jewelry. Terry Harland? Yes, ma'am, Terry answered quickly. I found the evidence in my father's possession. A diamond ring from the robbery downtown yesterday. Yesterday. The word rattled in my skull. While he had been off at supposed job interviews, the pieces clicked together with brutal precision in my engineer's mind. Brooks relayed something into her radio as the other officers fanned out across the patio. The steaks burned on the grill, smoke rising thick and acrid. Sir, step away from the fire, she ordered. The command left no room for argument. I obeyed slowly, hands visible, my mind spinning. This was my backyard, my grill, my family, and yet I was being treated like a suspect, betrayed by my own son. Terry walked with them toward the house, pointing out details with unnerving certainty. He knew exactly where my bag was, which pocket to check. His knowledge was too precise, rehearsed. Zella trailed behind, silent tears streaking her face. But even her grief seemed staged, practiced, as though she and Terry had rehearsed their roles. At the back door, I caught Terry's reflection in the glass. Just for a moment, when he thought no one was looking, the mask slipped. The face of a dutiful son vanished, replaced by something cold, calculating. My own son had called the police on me. And I was stepping into a trap decades in the making. Inside, Officer Brooks emptied my backpack onto the coffee table with clinical precision. Tape measure. Gloves. Notebook. Energy bars. The tools of an honest life spent building, not stealing. Terry hovered at her side, smug confidence in every movement. It should be in the front pocket, he said. Wrapped in tissue. I saw him put it there this afternoon. His confidence was too sharp, too precise, damning in itself. No son should know his father's supposed hiding spots so intimately, unless he'd planted something there himself. Officer Brooks searched methodically, pocket by pocket. The main compartment turned up nothing but the clutter of work, tape measure, gloves, notes. Side pockets revealed only pens and business cards. I watched as Terry's steady expression began to fracture at the edges. Mr. Harlan, Brooks said, glancing up from the emptied bag. We're not locating the item you described. It has to be there. Terry blurted, his voice cracking higher than before. I saw him put it in the front pocket. You must have missed it. Look again. That was the moment it all aligned, the too specific knowledge, the forced energy masked as excitement, the way he guided the search straight to my backpack while keeping his own possessions off limits. Officer, I said evenly, surprising myself with the calmness of my tone, you might want to take a look inside my son's dresser drawer. Terry spun toward me, eyes wide with sudden panic. What? No. That's insane. There's no reason to. But Brooks was already heading upstairs, one of her partners close behind. Terry's protests turned frenzied as we followed. This is harassment. You can't just rifle through our private. Terry Harlan. Brooks cut him off as she opened the door. Your behavior gives us more than enough cause. The dresser stood exactly as I'd left it not long before. Officer Martinez pulled open the middle drawer, his hands practiced as he pushed aside socks and undergarments. Within seconds he retrieved the tissue paper. Terry's face strained of color as the ring was revealed, diamonds winking under the bedroom light like an accusation made solid. The very same ring I'd unearthed from my own bag now sealed in an evidence pouch, bearing his fingerprints on the wrapping. Terry Harlan, you are under arrest for filing a false police report and for possession of stolen property. The recitation of Miranda rights seemed distant, muffled, as the cuffs locked around my son's wrists. Zella broke down in the hallway, her carefully rehearsed poise collapsing into ragged sobs. This is a mistake, Terry shouted as officers escorted him toward the stairs. You don't get it, the ring was in his bag. I put it there myself. His words hung in the air, thick as the smoke still drifting from our abandoned grill. Even in custody, he couldn't help but expose just how deep his deception ran. I stood in the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of the search, tools scattered from my bag, furniture shoved aside, watching 3 decades of fatherhood dissolve into handcuffs and accusations. Through the front window, I could see neighbors gathering under the pulse of red and blue lights, whispering, staring. Terry's voice carried into the street, still insisting he was misunderstood, still trying to convince someone, anyone, that his father had engineered his own downfall. But the truth was there in black and white, written in tissue paper and buried in sock drawers. A story authored by a son who had mistaken patience for weakness. The house felt foreign now, emptier, stripped of something essential when Terry was led away. Police forms blanketed my kitchen table, an unwanted jigsaw puzzle. Evidence logs, timelines, photos, statements. The paper trail of betrayal documented with clinical clarity. I'd been at it since dawn, piecing things together with the precision of an engineer. The coffee in Martha's old mug had long gone cold, untouched. I couldn't bring myself to drink from it. The entire room felt tainted by lies I should have seen sooner. Terry's official statement painted him as a dutiful son uncovering his father's supposed crimes. Reading it was like watching a stranger's face wearing my son's skin. Every phrase calculated, every answer rehearsed. This wasn't panic, it was months of planning. A photograph clipped to the file showed the exact ring, tagged from Diamond Haven Jewelers. Valued at $18,500. Another sheet listed Terry's debts, $23,000 in losses, most of it from Prairie Wind Casino. The math fit perfectly. The interview. I muttered into the empty room, my voice echoing off walls that no longer felt like home. That was his alibi. The steak dinner, the celebration, the easy laughter, all a setup. If his scheme had worked, I'd be the one in a cell, stripped of my home, my reputation, everything I'd built over 30 years. He would have let me rot so he and Zella could live comfortably on the ruins of my life. A sharp knock at the door broke through the spiral of my thoughts. Through the glass, I recognized Cecil's silhouette, shoulders heavy with concern. I'd known he would come sooner or later. The whole neighborhood had been buzzing since last night, lights flashing, rumors spreading. Ray. His voice, when I opened the door, carried the kind of gentleness usually reserved for approaching an injured animal. Saw the reports on the news this morning. Thought you might need some company. He held out 2 cups of coffee, his expression that of a man who delivered bad news to grieving families too many times in his police years. Cecil understood betrayal in a way most people never had to. Come in, I said quietly, stepping aside. I'm still trying to figure out how long this was going on. Cecil's eyes swept the kitchen table, where files, reports, and photographs lay scattered in disarray. His trained mind catalogued the details with professional ease, but his weary slump betrayed his sympathy. This wasn't sloppy work, he murmured, sitting across from me. Your son knew exactly how to shape the evidence. If you hadn't touched that ring. I still don't know why I did, I admitted. Something about that night, it just felt wrong. Cecil tapped the timeline with one finger, tracing Terry's movements. That instinct kept you out of prison. Look, everything was mapped out. The timing of the robbery, the planted ring, even Zella's rehearsed alibi. Every piece was ready to bury you. The faint smell of bacon drifted in from a neighbor's kitchen, a cruel reminder of how ordinary this morning should have been. Instead, I sat staring at proof that my own son had been willing to trade my freedom for money. He'd have inherited everything, I said, the weight of it hitting me all at once. The house, my retirement, Martha's insurance. All of it. Cecil gave a slow, grim nod. And with you painted as a criminal, no one would have doubted his story. Would have been airtight, if not for you. I stacked the reports into neat piles, engineering order from chaos. Evidence, timeline, motive, consequences. Each pile another reminder of how far my son was willing to go. I need a lawyer, I said at last. For the house, for Zella, for what comes next. Cecil stood. Then let's get you one, Ray. It's time you thought about protecting your future, not just living in their betrayal. I looked around the kitchen, the same table where Terry had once laughed over family dinners. Now the same place he'd slammed his fist in anger. The same window where I'd caught a glimpse of his deception. Every corner tainted. Rising felt like lifting a boulder, but also like letting one drop from my shoulders. By 8:30 sharp, Cecil and I stood on the courthouse steps. 3 weeks of meetings with prosecutors had led here, this moment, watching my son face justice for trying to unravel my life. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with restrained efficiency. The polished wood and solemn atmosphere couldn't mask the human drama pressing at its seams. I tugged at the tie around my neck, the one I hadn't worn since Martha's funeral 5 years ago. Across the room, Terry sat at the defense table in orange jail garb, shackled. The weeks behind bars had hollowed him. His eyes flicked toward me, and in that instant I saw desperation where once there had been smug certainty. Zella sat pale and frail in the gallery, dressed in borrowed formal clothes that hung loose on her frame. "Mr. Harlan," the prosecutor began once I'd sworn in, "please describe what you witnessed on April 17th. "I saw my son place a stolen ring in my backpack," I answered evenly, my words measured, stripped of emotion. "An engineer reporting facts." The defense pressed. "Isn't it possible, sir, that you misunderstood his intentions?" "No," I said. "The evidence is unambiguous." On the courtroom monitor, the Diamond Haven footage played. Terry's figure, clear as day, carrying out the robbery. The timestamp lined up perfectly with the job interview he'd claimed. I didn't watch the screen. I watched Terry. Watched the exact moment realization washed over him. That his lies had been captured forever. When Judge Reed finally pronounced sentencing, Terry tried one last desperate cry. "Dad, please, you don't get it. The debts, the gambling." "Terry Harlan," Judge Reed cut sharply, "you are hereby sentenced to 5 years in state prison for armed robbery and attempted witness tampering." The gavel cracked against wood, echoing like the sound of a door slamming on 30 years of fatherhood. The bailiffs escorted Terry out in chains. He glanced back at me, but I held his gaze without offering a response. Zella, in contrast, received 2 years of probation and community service for testifying, along with a requirement to secure her own housing within a month. The judge's explanation, rehabilitation over punishment, felt clinical and detached compared to the blunt reality of watching my son disappear through the courthouse exit. When the gavel fell, the reporters swarmed in the hallway, questions flying about betrayal, justice, and family. I pushed past without a word, my thoughts already turning to the practical work of selling the house and beginning again. Cecil stayed by my side, his silence more comforting than any attempt at sympathy. The elevator dropped us into the lobby, where life outside continued unchanged, indifferent to mine that had just been uprooted. "How are you holding up?" Cecil asked quietly as we reached his car. "Like I buried my son today," I answered flatly. Only this time, it was by his own choice. The ride back wound through suburban Omaha, the neighborhood suddenly unfamiliar, like I was already a stranger here. Some endings bring joy, others relief. This one carried the weight of acceptance, that sometimes blood can cut deeper than any enemy. Survival meant choosing myself over loyalty to those who had abandoned me. Back home, the hall was lined with boxes, standing like guards at the gate of my escape. 30 years of life pared down to the essentials. Clothes, tools, Martha's photographs, and the paperwork that proved my innocence. Everything else, the furniture, the appliances, the memories soaked into these walls, would stay behind with the ghosts. Zella emerged from the spare room, a small suitcase in her hand, her face etched with fear. The court order required her to leave as well, though unlike me, she had no clear destination. "Ray, please," she pleaded, stepping into my path near the front door. "Don't turn me out. I have nowhere to go. Terry forced me into this. I was too afraid to refuse him." I paused, watching her twist the same wedding band she had spun nervously while lying about Terry's job hunt. "You should have thought about consequences before you helped betray me," I said evenly. "You had choices, Zella. And you chose wrong." Tears welled. "But I have no money, no family. Where am I supposed to go?" "You'll manage," I told her. "People do, when survival is their only option. At precisely 10, Mrs. Henderson, the realtor, arrived with the closing papers. She'd shown rare patience through the delays, recognizing that healing required time. We sat at the same kitchen table where arguments once erupted, now turned into a desk for signing away ownership. The name changed from Ray Harlan to that of a young couple, thrilled to call it their first home. "Here are the keys to your Denver apartment," she said, sliding a small envelope across the table. "One bedroom, Mountain View, just like you asked." Cecil appeared in the doorway, having helped load the moving truck that trailed behind my pickup. His handshake lingered, a wordless acknowledgement that this goodbye carried more weight than most. "Promise me you'll come visit within 6 months," I said. "Promise me you'll answer when I call," he replied, knowing that distance was necessary, but isolation wasn't. The moving truck rolled out first, carrying what was left of my life toward the Rockies. I walked through the house one last time, stripping Terry's photos from the walls but leaving the nail holes behind, proof that once, a family had lived here. In the garage, my pickup was waiting, loaded with the essentials of my new existence. New license plates, new address, new number, an entire life rebuilt from the ground up. On the sidewalk, Zella stood watching as I backed out of the driveway where I had once taught Terry to ride his bike. Nostalgia couldn't undo betrayal, and it couldn't outweigh the need to let go. The highway opened ahead, signs pointing west. I turned the radio to country, rolled the windows down, and felt the first rush of freedom I hadn't known since Martha passed. The city shrank in the rearview mirror while the mountains grew on the horizon, towering like promises of clarity and renewal. At 58, I was starting fresh. No obligations, no family chains, no guilt for choosing myself. The hum of the engine carried me forward, a man who had learned that sometimes the truest act of love is refusing to enable those determined to destroy you. Behind me lay 30 years of misplaced loyalty. Ahead waited whatever I decided to build with the time still mine to use. For the first time in years, that was enough.